May 2017. The biting desert wind enveloped the massive rock crevice next to Hoover Dam, more than 30 miles from Las Vegas, Nevada. Light from the road inspection team's survey lamps pierced through the dust and decades-accumulated darkness, shining down on something no one ever thought would be found again. Control. We have a large, metal structure lying at the bottom of the crevice. Request forensic team to the scene immediately. The engineer's voice echoed off the dry, cracked rock walls. What began as a routine survey after heavy rain had now become something entirely different, something that would answer the questions haunting Nevada for 15 years. The twisted silver car frame, buried deep in the earth and rock. And nearby were traces that once belonged to one of the state's most mysterious disappearances. The Civic that Hannah Mercer had driven on the night she vanished on the way from the Bellagio to Henderson in 2002. For over a decade, Hannah's disappearance was just emptiness and silence. A confident, ambitious young woman who walked out of her shift on a summer evening and then vanished from the world as if she had never existed. An empty chair at every holiday. A bedroom that the family never closed. Before continuing this shocking story, take a second to hit subscribe and like the video. Your support helps forgotten stories be brought back to light, and the algorithms will ensure you don't miss any videos in the future. The discovery under the Hoover Dam crevice didn't just end a disappearance, it was the first domino in a chain of events that would expose secrets buried for 15 years in the Nevada community. Because when authorities finally zeroed in on the suspect and made the arrest in 2017, it wasn't a stranger or some random passerby. It was someone who had appeared before police, smiled at the community, lived among them for years, carrying a truth no one suspected. The Hannah Mercer case isn't just a mystery unraveled, it's proof of a family that never gave persistence, investigators who refused to let the file gather dust, and forensic advances that gave voice back to a victim silenced for too long. It's also the story of a community divided. When Hannah disappeared in 2002, suspicion spread through Henderson like fire meeting wind. Neighbors looked at each other with questioning eyes. Friends fell silent. Family relationships cracked. The search for Hannah exposed underground fractures that had existed longer than anyone dared admit. Those fractures would split wide open when the truth was finally revealed after 15 years. What makes this case particularly haunting is that the answer was always very close. The main suspect had been interviewed right in the initial investigation, but slipped through the cracks. For years, that person attended Hannah's memorials, looked into her family's eyes, maintained an innocent facade, while hiding an unimaginable secret. Where are you watching from today? Leave your location in the comments below. I'm always curious how far these stories travel and how they connect us across distances. Tonight we'll go back to the days of June 2002, trace the years-long search for answers, and explore the stunning breakthrough that paved the way for closure in one of Nevada's most mysterious cold cases. This is the story of loss, persistence, deception, and ultimately justice delayed, but never denied. Nevada in 2002 wore the characteristic atmosphere of a land, both prosperous and harsh. Las Vegas glowing, noisy, and in constant motion, while Henderson, just a short drive away, was quiet enough that one could hear the desert wind whistling through the empty lots. Between these two contrasting worlds, Hannah Mercer ended her evening shift at the Bellagio, where lights, sounds, and the frantic pace surrounded her for hours. As she stepped out of the employee exit, she left the blinding glow of the Las Vegas Strip behind to head toward the parking lot, where only the hot end-of-day winds and the sporadic engine sounds of a few other cars remained. Hannah got into her familiar car and headed toward the road to Henderson, a route she had driven hundreds of times, familiar enough that she didn't need to think much about it. The farther she got from the center, the more the urban lights receded behind her, giving way to the endless long stretches of darkness on the desert fringe. The straight and empty road, sparse houses, and wide-open spaces with no one around created the characteristic isolation of Nevada suburbs. For Hannah, this evening was supposed to be like any other. Late shift end, drive back to her small apartment in Henderson, then rest before another workday. But as time passed without her appearing, her roommate began to feel something was wrong. Hannah being late wasn't rare, but her not contacting anyone, not responding to any calls, had never happened. Her family, not far away, also received no news. The frantic calls only met silence. They checked every simple possibility: phone battery dead, traffic jam, sudden busy matter, but no reason fit such a prolonged disappearance. The initial worry gradually turned into real unease as the night passed, and Hannah still hadn't returned. No one knew where she was. No one understood what had happened. When all hope that the delay was just a temporary glitch completely vanished, the family had no choice but to act. In a state of extreme tension and confusion, they went to the Henderson police station to report that Hannah Mercer was missing. Here, the officer on duty took the initial information, invited them to sit down, and asked them to recount the entire incident from the moment Hannah left work to the moment the family realized she hadn't come home as usual. The fact that Hannah hadn't contacted anyone for many hours, combined with her regular lifestyle habits, made police view this case as more noteworthy than a typical delay. After determining this wasn't the kind of situation the family could delay further, police began creating a missing person file according to the procedure for adults disappearing under unusual circumstances. They requested full basic identification information: age, physical description, workplace at the Bellagio, usual shift end time, daily vehicle, and residence address. The family provided identification photos and confirmed Hannah left work in the evening as usual, but didn't return. From there, police moved to the initial statement collection phase to understand the victim's lifestyle, as assessing habits is a key factor in adult missing person cases. They asked the roommate about Hannah's schedule, what time she usually came home, whether she often changed plans last minute, whether she was used to staying out late or mostly went straight home. The roommate confirmed Hannah rarely changed her schedule without notice, especially after late shifts. The family added that Hannah had no history of running away, no internal conflicts, and no recent signs of psychological instability. This information was recorded as factors strengthening the assessment that this disappearance was unusual and inconsistent with the victim's typical behavior. Police continued asking about that day's work schedule. Did Hannah meet anyone before her shift? Did she mention needing to go somewhere else after work, or share anything indicating she was changing her daily routine? The family confirmed Hannah worked her scheduled shift, with no prior mention of any appointments or special plans. The roommate also confirmed no information about Hannah stopping somewhere else before heading home. Police shifted to collecting information about Hannah's close network, family, close colleagues, friends, or people she often met recently. This aimed to determine if she had mentioned anything that could affect her personal life, anyone making her feel uneasy, or any new personal relationship causing sudden schedule changes. When all statements showed Hannah had no troubles, no plans to leave Nevada, and no unusual actions beforehand, police had grounds to assess that the disappearance wasn't voluntary, but likely related to an incident on the way home. After completing the initial statement collection, police asked the family to describe exactly the car Hannah used and the route she usually took. Though not delving into analysis or tracing at this stage, recording the vehicle and route helped them define the spatial limits to consider in the next file step. All information was entered into the report, including vehicle description, license plate, travel habits, and factors related to the time Hannah left the Bellagio. When all initial data was cross-checked, police officially determined that Hannah left work in the evening and did not return to her residence, with no calls, messages, or any signs of intentional disconnection. The level of unusualness, combined with the fact that her closest people couldn't find a reasonable explanation for the prolonged silence, led authorities to evaluate Hannah's case as a missing person requiring early intervention. After completing the report intake and initial file creation, Henderson police moved to analyzing possible routes Hannah Mercer might have used to travel from the Bellagio to her apartment in Henderson. This work was based on information collected from the family and roommate, especially descriptions of Hannah's daily travel habits. According to them, Hannah rarely changed her route unless there was an unexpected event like severe traffic or sudden lane closure. Based on that, police focused on 3 main routes locals commonly used to go from central Las Vegas to Henderson in similar timeframes. The first route was Hannah's most frequent, combining the connector from the hotel area to the major highway, then continuing on the main axis straight to the Henderson residential area. This route had the advantage of being stable and familiar, but police also noted some poorly lit sections, especially when leaving the center. The second route was an option some Bellagio employees chose to avoid heavy evening traffic, going through inner-city roads then connecting to the highway not far from the center. This route had more complex terrain, many intersections and narrow sections, but sometimes faster at Hannah's shift end time. The third route was less common, but the family said Hannah had used it a few times when she wanted to stop for food or at a shopping area between central Las Vegas and Henderson. This route had good lighting and evening activity, but also sections bordering low traffic areas, especially when leaving shopping zones to merge into the main road to Henderson. Police evaluated each route based on 3 main criteria: terrain, traffic level, and incident potential. For terrain, they noted the shift from urban to isolated suburban areas, with dark road sections where night visibility dropped significantly, and desert bordering areas where accidents could occur unnoticed by passers-by. For traffic, routes leaving the center at Hannah's shift end were usually light, meaning if an incident occurred, direct witness chances were low. For incident potential, police noted sections with accident history, uneven pavement, or sharp curves where vehicles easily lost control at night. After analyzing these factors, the 3 routes were circled as the initial search area, each marked into segments based on terrain features and risk level. Police created a search scope diagram covering the full length of these routes, divided into smaller areas for systematic segment-by-segment checks. In the diagram, they clearly marked transition points from well-lit to dark areas, curved or narrow sections, and zones bordering open land or natural slopes. Upon completing the route analysis and initial search scope setup, Henderson police shifted to verifying information about people who had contact with Hannah Mercer in the time before her evening shift, on the day she disappeared, to determine if anyone held key information related to her schedule or activities before leaving work. During statement collection from the family and roommate, the name Evan Pike was mentioned as one of the closest acquaintances and the person who met Hannah on the day of the disappearance. This made police view Evan as an information link needing early clarification to determine if that meeting related to Hannah not coming home. Evan was invited in as a witness to provide information. At the session, he confirmed meeting Hannah before her Bellagio shift. According to Evan, he and Hannah knew each other through outdoor sports activities, occasionally meeting to chat or exchange about work and life. That day, the meeting was completely coincidental when they ran into each other near the central area and spent a short time chatting before her shift. Evan said the conversation revolved around familiar topics, with nothing unusual in Hannah's attitude or words. He described Hannah seeming tired after consecutive workdays, but in stable spirits and not mentioning needing to handle personal issues or change plans that day. When asked about the time they parted for Hannah to go to work, Evan confirmed it was just a short, unplanned meeting. They said goodbye when Hannah needed to get to the Bellagio to prepare for her shift as usual. Police recorded this detail as it matched information from Hannah's work schedule provided by the Bellagio. The timelines Evan described weren't mechanically matched, but confirmed through cross-checking with the time Hannah was recorded present at work, showing his statement was reasonable in the investigation context. Besides describing the meeting, Evan was also asked about their relationship, including closeness level and contact frequency. He explained they maintain normal contact, not too frequent, but enough to know some habits and life states of each other. This helped police gain more information about Hannah's lifestyle, cross-referencing with family and roommate statements. When asked if he noticed any signs Hannah was in trouble, Evan said no. He confirmed Hannah shared nothing unusual in her personal life, nor mentioned meeting anyone else that day besides going to work on schedule. Police recorded this to form a more comprehensive view of Hannah's state before disappearance. Alongside recording statements, Police checked verifiable points from Evan's information, like Hannah's shift start time, Bellagio work schedule, nearby areas where Evan said they met, and some related auxiliary data. Though exact timing wasn't verified by high-quality recording devices, indirect data confirmed Hannah was in the central area in a time frame matching Evan's statement and arrived at work on schedule. This consistency led Evan's statement to be evaluated as highly reliable in the file's early stage. Police also noted Evan provided no internally contradictory information or conflicting with available data. He showed no evasive behavior, nor changed his statement during the session. This led investigators to assess his involvement level in Hannah's disappearance as low, at least at this point. However, they still noted that every meeting before the disappearance time must be fully examined to ensure nothing important was overlooked. After completing the collection of statements from Evan Pike and confirming the data related to Hannah's appearance at the Bellagio on the evening she went missing, the police moved on to the step of analyzing visual materials in the area. This was an important part in the process of reconstructing the route leaving the hotel, as the security cameras at the place where Hannah worked and around the central Las Vegas area could capture defining moments, even though the image quality in 2002 was still limited. The police first worked with the Bellagio security department to access the camera system at the employee entrances. Although many cameras used low-resolution recording technology, especially at night, they still had value in determining the times vehicles entered and exited the area. Security personnel assisted in cross-referencing images within the relevant time frame, and the police found a segment recording a vehicle with the same style and color matching the description of Hannah's vehicle leaving the employee parking area after her shift ended. Although the license plate was not clearly visible, the overall characteristics of the vehicle and the time of appearance matched other data, so the police marked this image as a preliminary confirmation point that Hannah had left the Bellagio as per the statements from her family and Evan. From that image, the police traced the initial direction of the vehicle's movement by checking cameras near the main exits connecting the Bellagio to the roads leading to Henderson. Some traffic cameras in the area recorded vehicle movements, but most only showed blurry silhouettes of cars in nighttime lighting conditions. Nevertheless, the police were able to determine that the vehicle left in the direction leading to the southern central area, consistent with one of the three routes Hannah typically used to return home. This data helped reinforce the route map established in the previous step, confirming that Hannah did not turn into side roads or commercial areas in the center before heading home, at least according to the images collected in the range near the hotel. In parallel with determining Hannah's initial direction of movement, the police also checked for the appearance of other vehicles that might be related. The goal was to see if any vehicle was following Hannah's in an unusual manner in the minutes after she left her workplace. During the review, the police noted several other vehicles leaving the area around the same time as Hannah's vehicle appeared, but most were just employee or tourist vehicles. The majority of these vehicles quickly merged into traffic and showed no special signs for the police to investigate further. However, this review was still documented to ensure that if new cross-referencing data emerged later, they could return to those frames. The police also paid attention to the appearance of some vehicles with styles or colors similar to the type of vehicle potentially related to the hypotheses they were considering, but due to blurry images and lack of identifying details, those vehicles could not be clearly identified. Nevertheless, all were stored as a group of reference photos to serve the next analysis steps. From these visual data, the police determined two important factors. First, Hannah had left her workplace in her own vehicle in a direction consistent with her travel habits. Second, no vehicle displayed clear following behavior at the recording points near the Bellagio. Although the cameras only provided information within a limited range, they played an important role in confirming that Hannah had appeared at the exact location and time described in the file. In addition, knowing the precise direction of departure from the central area helped narrow the search scope and eliminate some unnecessary directions. After completing the analysis of visual data at the Bellagio area and determining the initial direction of movement of the vehicle believed to be Hannah's, the police continued to review personal relationships that might be related to her activities on the day of the disappearance. From statements by family, roommates, and some acquaintances of Hannah, the name Lauren Bright was mentioned as someone with a certain connection to both Hannah and several individuals in her social circle. Although there was no direct evidence that Lauren met Hannah on the day she disappeared, Lauren's personal connection to people close to the victim led the police to view her as someone who needed to be contacted to clarify information related to the context before Hannah went missing. Lauren was invited to provide a statement at the Henderson police station, with the main purpose of determining whether she knew any information related to Hannah's schedule, plans, or psychological state in the most recent time before she left work. When working with the police, Lauren provided some information about her own activities on the night Hannah went missing. According to her, that evening, she was at her residence and had no notable appointments or travel plans. She described her evening in a relatively general way, saying that she spent most of the time at home, resting and doing personal activities. When asked to provide specific activity milestones, Lauren gave descriptions that were not very detailed, mainly everyday activities without clear determination of time or witnesses who could confirm. The police recorded this statement and noted that, compared to the level of accuracy in describing Hannah's schedule provided by family and roommates, the information from Lauren lacked the necessary specificity to fully assess its fit with the events of the night of the disappearance. During the process, the police also asked Lauren about her relationship with Hannah and others in the common friend group. Lauren admitted that she knew Hannah at a social level, not very close but enough to know some general information about each other's work and life through meetings and joint activities. She did not mention any recent events or situations that could affect Hannah, and affirmed that there was no exchange between them on the day Hannah went missing. When cross-referencing Lauren's statement with data collected from other sources, the police noted several points worth noting. First, Lauren's statement about staying home all evening had no direct verification factors, as she could not provide witnesses or specific signs to check. Second, the timeframes Lauren described were quite vague, lacking the necessary clarity to completely rule out the possibility of movement during the time Hannah left work. Third, the personal connection between Lauren and important people in the case context led the police to examine her statement more carefully to ensure no notable details were missed. However, it should also be noted that Lauren did not show evasive attitude or refuse to cooperate. She answered the police questions consistently in content, though lacking details. This cooperative attitude was recorded as a factor to assess her level of involvement in the early stage of the file. On the police side, after recording all of Lauren's statement, they proceeded to cross-reference it with the information collected from the previous visual data analysis and route map. This cross-referencing showed no point in Lauren's statement that immediately contradicted the visual data on the direction of movement of the vehicle believed to be Hannah's. However, because Lauren's statement lacked the necessary specification of time and location, the police could not independently verify what she said. This made her statement recorded as reference value but needing further checking in subsequent stages of the file. Another point the police noted was how Lauren described the level of closeness between herself and Hannah. While statements from friends and family stated that they knew each other at a normal social level, Lauren's statement somewhat emphasized the lack of closeness, which was not a contradiction but was recorded as a detail requiring further examination to determine the accuracy of this assessment. After completing the collection of statements from Lauren Bright, and noting the points that could not be verified in the information she provided, the Henderson police moved to the first field search phase, focusing on the range near where Hannah was last seen through visual data at the Bellagio and nearby cameras. The goal of this phase was to scan the road sections Hannah likely passed through in the first few minutes after leaving the work area, based on the initial direction of movement determined in the previous part. To implement the search, the police divided the area into small zones along the routes Hannah typically used, and the connecting side routes to the central area. Each zone was assigned to a team to ensure the scanning was systematic and did not miss small road sections, hidden curbs, or little-noticed intersections. During this process, the search team focused on checking the road sections immediately after leaving the Bellagio area, where Hannah was recorded moving south of the central area. This was a region with relatively complex traffic characteristics, with many small roads interwoven before merging into the major highway system. Therefore, every meter of curb, bush, drainage ditch, and road-adjacent area was alternately scanned to search for any signs indicating an incident occurred on Hannah's journey. While checking some road sections leading out of the central area, the search team discovered a few small pieces of material scattered near the curb. These pieces included plastic fragments and a few small metal pieces of unclear origin. However, due to the traffic characteristics near central Las Vegas being crowded with high vehicle density, discovering materials on the roadside did not mean they were related to Hannah's disappearance. The police recorded the positions and characteristics of them and transferred them to the technical department for preliminary analysis, but at the time of discovery, they did not have enough factors to be considered truly valuable leads. In addition to paying attention to scattered materials, the search team also focused on examining road sections with dangerous terrain, especially complex intersections, areas with slight downhill slopes, or positions where street lighting significantly decreased when leaving the center. These areas were assessed as having higher risk of accidents at night, especially when the driver was tired after a long shift. The search team also paid attention to road sections far from residential areas where an incident could occur without witnesses. However, in the range near the Bellagio, most roads were relatively well lit, with enough vehicle density that if a serious incident occurred, it was likely someone would have seen or reported it. This led the police to conclude that the possibility of Hannah encountering an incident right in the area near her workplace was low, but eliminating this possibility still required full checking. As they just passed the central range, the search team continued to scan road sections lying between the crowded area and the boundary with Henderson, where street lighting gradually thinned and space widened. Some road sections had low curbs and edges sloping down to empty land or deep drainage ditches, creating conditions for vehicles to veer off the road without being easily noticed from afar. These areas were thoroughly checked, but the search team did not discover signs of a vehicle crashing down or skidding, such as long skid marks, abnormally displaced grass, or disturbed soil. They also did not find large-scale debris that could relate to a collision or serious incident. Throughout the search process, the police documented and marked on the map the places that had been checked to avoid duplication and ensure the entire nearest range was scanned in sequence. The search lasted many hours, combining checks by patrol vehicles, on foot, and manual observation of each road section to not miss any hidden corners that could conceal signs of an incident. Despite efforts to expand the range within a reasonable radius, the search team still did not obtain any specific leads, indicating that Hannah's disappearance originated from the area adjacent to where she left the Bellagio. After completing the scanning of the nearest range without obtaining any reliable traces related to Hannah Mercer's disappearance, the Henderson police decided to expand the search scope to less populated areas, where the possibility of an incident occurring without witnesses would be significantly higher. This was a much more difficult search phase due to the terrain characteristics on the edge of the Nevada desert, scattered dirt roads, sloping terrain, deep mountain crevices, and natural lowlands that could make a vehicle in distress hard to see from the road. The expanded range included the area connecting South Las Vegas and the edge of Henderson, extending to road sections leading to sparsely populated land at the foot of low mountain ranges. These routes were not too far from the central area, but had many sections without lighting, uneven road surfaces, and sides sloping down to wide land areas. This was assessed as an area prone to situations of vehicle loss of control, especially when the driver was tired in the evening. To implement the search, the police divided forces into many small teams, each responsible for a specific area. They started by checking side dirt roads, little-used turnoffs, and road sections bordering desolate areas. Field scanning in these areas required high caution, as many sections had unstable road surfaces, jagged rocks, or deep ditches right next to the road edge. In such terrain, a vehicle could fall down without leaving easily noticeable traces from the road. The patrol teams used off-road vehicles and high-power lighting equipment to scan each slope, each inclined land area. Whenever an area with deep downhill slope or natural cliff was discovered, they recorded the position, conducted visual observation, and moved down to the lower area for checking. Some slopes were assessed as high risk because there were signs of vehicles having turned down or stopped. But upon close checking, the search team did not discover skid marks, dents in the ground, or any signs indicating a vehicle had crashed down. Many areas had terrain structures making a distressed vehicle hard to detect if not approached from a high direction. For that reason, the police requested support from state agency helicopters to increase panoramic observation capability. Helicopters were deployed at favorable weather times, flying along low hill ranges and trails cutting through the desert. From above, the crews searched for abnormal signs such as metal reflecting light, disturbed soil areas, patchy brake marks, or objects lying unnaturally in lowlands. They also focused on observing rock crevices and shallow canyons between land slopes, as these were places a vehicle could fall into without being easily noticeable from the ground. However, despite scanning many wide areas, the helicopter did not discover any clear signs related to Hannah's vehicle. Every suspected object was checked from the ground afterward, but all were just rocks, metal waste, or unrelated material pieces. When the helicopter combined with ground teams to check deeper areas, they focused on intersections between main roads and dirt roads, where many vehicles could accidentally turn in. Some teams checked dead-end road sections, areas used as turnaround points, or places where vehicles sometimes stopped at night. But all these positions showed no signs of Hannah's vehicle presence. One of the most difficult areas to search was the sections bordering the road and natural terrain cracks, where land crevices opened suddenly, then sloped down several meters. The search team had to use lighting from multiple angles to check the ground below, but they did not see any objects with shape or size resembling a vehicle. In sandy land areas near the desert, the police scanned strange tire tracks, but most were old traces from off-road vehicles, light trucks, or maintenance service vehicles, with no signs matching the tire pattern of Hannah's vehicle. Many wide land areas were scanned without obtaining any useful results. As the search day prolonged, the police continuously noted the areas checked, created detailed maps to ensure no position was missed. They also relied on practical experience to assess which points, though not highly feasible, still needed checking to ensure the completeness of the search phase. The results after expanding the search to less populated areas showed no signs of Hannah's vehicle falling down a slope, getting stuck in a rock crevice, or present at any remote position within the scanned range. After completing the 2 search phases in the nearby and expanded ranges without obtaining any clear traces of Hannah or her vehicle, the Henderson police entered the data synthesis process in the first month since the disappearance was reported. The goal of this step was to connect all the collected information, possible travel routes, statements from involved individuals, image data from the work area, along with field search results, to establish a unified analysis framework and identify unresolved points. First, the police reviewed the routes Hannah might have used to leave the Bellagio on the night she disappeared. Through camera data, they determined the initial direction of movement of a vehicle with characteristics matching hers, thereby narrowing the range of routes she might have taken. Combining this information with statements from family and roommates about her travel habits, they confirmed that Hannah almost certainly began her journey along one of the 3 main routes previously analyzed. Each route was linked to the review results from the search section. Dangerous areas had been checked, ravines and mountain crevices had been scanned using a combination of ground forces and helicopters. Road segments with potential for accidents had also been ruled out due to the absence of any impact traces or suitable materials. This meant that, although Hannah's journey might have started along a familiar route, there was no evidence that her vehicle encountered any issues at the points the police considered highest risk. After synthesizing the search results, the police included in the report that there were no tire tracks, no suspiciously disturbed soil areas, no vehicle drop points, and no objects matching the description of Hannah's car throughout the entire scanned range. When cross-referencing this data with statements from Evan Pike and Lauren Bright, the police noted that Evan's information was clear, logical, and indirectly confirmed by multiple other data points. In contrast, Lauren's statement did not directly contradict the image data, but lacked verification basis and had many vague points about timing. This did not lead to any specific conclusion, but was considered a detail to note in the synthesis report, as missing persons cases often require investigating agencies to consider all possibilities, including those without strong enough evidence. One of the most important factors in the data synthesis phase was determining the time period when Hannah lost trace. Through analysis of all available information, the police concluded that the time from when Hannah left the Bellagio until she no longer appeared in any cameras on nearby routes could be pinpointed within a relatively narrow window. The brevity of this time period made tracing back the events difficult, as it left few reference points to detect unusual changes in the journey. This trace loss period, when placed in the context of the route Hannah might have taken, indicated that she disappeared not on busy or easily accessible road segments, but more likely in harder-to-observe areas without cameras or witnesses. This was the point that complicated the case. The lack of direct data in a short but critical time window led to the inability to fully reconstruct her journey. Based on the entire synthesized data, the police began drafting three main investigative directions. The first was the possibility of a lone accident, in which Hannah's vehicle encountered an issue at a location too far from view or outside the initial search range. This direction was considered because off-road accidents in desert areas could result in the vehicle being in hard-to-reach positions, but there was currently no concrete evidence supporting this hypothesis. The second was the possibility that Hannah left voluntarily. However, based on statements from family and roommates about her personality and habits, plus the absence of signs of preparation to leave her residence, the police noted this hypothesis but assessed it as low in likelihood. The third was the possibility of intervention by others, though without specific evidence. This hypothesis was included in the report due to Lauren's unclear statement and some other unverified points, but it remained at a speculative level and required more data for deeper evaluation. After completing the data synthesis process in the first month and finding no direct traces indicating Hannah's or her vehicle's location, the Henderson police decided to expand the investigation by focusing on the vehicle and potential witnesses who could provide indirect information about the presence of a silver Honda Civic in the area at the relevant time. This was a necessary step because in missing persons cases involving adults traveling by personal vehicle, the vehicle's whereabouts often play a key role and can provide important leads even if the victim cannot be found in the initial phase. First, the police reviewed the list of all reports related to abandoned vehicles, vehicles suspected of accidents, or cars found in unusual locations from the time Hannah disappeared until 4 weeks later. This list was compiled from the Transportation Department, reports from neighboring police, towing centers, and public notices about vehicles parked for long periods without moving. In the list, several light-colored Civics were noted, but upon direct inspection, none were Hannah's or had been confirmed by their owners. Some other vehicles had been recovered by insurance companies after minor accidents, unrelated to the disappearance. The police also checked reports of vehicles dumped in suburban areas or sparsely populated regions, but most were old abandoned cars or damaged vehicles not matching the model and timeline of Hannah's case. Although this did not yield specific progress, it was still considered important as it helped eliminate many possibilities and further narrow the points to consider. In parallel with vehicle review, the police also conducted additional interviews with potential witnesses in areas Hannah might have passed through. They contacted residents near suburban routes, people who frequently traveled by bus or truck in the evening, and night shift employees at businesses on major roads between Las Vegas and Henderson. The goal was to find anyone who might have seen a silver Civic moving unusually, turning onto a side road, stopping in the middle of the road, or appearing in circumstances inconsistent with normal traffic. However, finding witnesses in this context faced many difficulties. The evening Hannah disappeared was not a time with much traffic on the routes she might have used, and most people questioned did not remember details about vehicles they encountered or saw during that period. Some reported seeing light-colored cars on main roads, but due to high traffic density and nighttime lighting making color distinction difficult, this information was not valuable enough to determine if it was Hannah's car. A few truck drivers said they saw small cars traveling in the same direction on suburban routes, but they could not recall clear details due to distance and limited lighting conditions. Nevertheless, the police still recorded all statements in the file, as even seemingly unhelpful details could become clues when cross-referenced with new data in the future. Simultaneously with witness interviews, the police re-examined all incident reports in the area from the time Hannah disappeared until the end of the first month. These reports included complaints about minor collisions, incidents involving vehicles leaving the lane, reports of unusual nighttime noises, as well as calls from residents reporting strange vehicle lights in remote areas. However, most reports were unrelated or occurred far from the routes Hannah might have used. Some other reports were determined to have clear causes, such as wildlife hitting vehicles, drivers briefly losing control but recovering, or vehicles with minor technical issues. No report described an event serious enough to potentially be directly related to the disappearance of a Civic and its driver. The police also looked into anonymous calls or reports from residents in areas bordering the desert, but most were general information that could not be verified or did not match the timeline. The biggest difficulty in this phase was the overly broad information density, but lack of specific anchors to determine what was relevant data. Many potential leads emerged, but upon re-examination were incompatible with the nature of the disappearance. After completing the expanded investigation into vehicles and witnesses, but still obtaining no clues that could provide clearer direction, the Henderson police returned to examining unresolved points in the file, among which Lauren Bright's statement continued to be seen as a factor needing further review before deciding whether to close or continue expanding the case. Although Lauren's statement did not directly contradict the collected data, the lack of specificity about timing and activities on the night Hannah disappeared led the investigating agency to assess that an additional verification step was needed to rule out or confirm any potential involvement. This verification focused on Lauren's vehicle because in missing persons cases involving personal vehicle travel, cross-referencing vehicles is often an effective way to determine if any contact or collision occurred during the time the victim lost trace. The police conducted a direct inspection of Lauren's car, noting the overall condition, with particular attention to the front bumper, rear bumper, and both sides of the body, areas that typically show traces if the vehicle had unusual contact on the road. Lauren cooperated by allowing the inspection, and the police recorded no signs indicating her vehicle had new scratches or deformations that could relate to an incident. A few minor scratches were found, but Lauren explained they had been there for a long time, from light bumps in parking lots, and checking the vehicle's maintenance records showed these matched times before Hannah's disappearance. The police found no points on the car with new signs of mechanical impact or unusual adhering materials. After the vehicle inspection, the investigating agency cross-referenced all of Lauren's statements with data collected in previous sections, including camera data, field search data, and statements from other witnesses. Lauren affirmed she was home all evening and did not leave her residence at the relevant time. The police checked the verifiability of this statement through indirect factors such as people who could confirm Lauren's presence that evening, personal activity signals, or signs indicating she traveled by vehicle. However, in Lauren's case, both verification directions, confirming she left home or confirming she stayed home, lacked specific supporting evidence. This did not make her statement false, but it also did not provide the level of clarity the agency desired to fully rule out or reinforce any hypothesis related to Hannah's disappearance. When comparing Lauren's statement with data on the movement direction of the vehicle, matching Hannah's recorded by cameras, the police found no evidence that Lauren's vehicle appeared in the area near the Bellagio. Additionally, the field search process through 2 large phases also did not detect any points indicating the presence of another vehicle near the disappearance time. This reduced the likelihood of Lauren being in the area without needing direct evidence from her vehicle. In the context where all collected data pointed to no clear direction, the police had to weigh Lauren's relevance based on three factors: statement, verifiability, and physical evidence. Her statement lacked details, but did not contradict. Verifiability was limited, but showed no unusual signs, and her vehicle had no related traces. From these three factors, the investigating agency assessed that there was no sufficiently strong basis to continue viewing Lauren as a suspect needing focus at the current time. Instead, she was recorded as a witness who provided information but had no direct linking factors to the disappearance events. After completing the final review steps with Lauren Bright and finding no signs substantial enough to expand the investigation direction, the Henderson police entered the phase of synthesizing all results obtained over the 3 years since Hannah Mercer's disappearance was reported in 2002. This was a systematic evaluation step to determine whether there was any basis to continue deploying active investigative measures or if the file needed to be transferred to archive status due to no longer having viable data to pursue. The investigating agency reviewed all statements from involved parties, including family, roommates, Evan Pike, and Lauren Bright, while cross-referencing them with technical data collected from cameras in the Bellagio area and nearby routes. All this data was placed side by side to see if any intersection points formed a new investigative direction, but the results showed that the collected information had already been utilized to the maximum and no new elements appeared. From the image data, police could only confirm that the vehicle matching Hannah's car left the work area in the familiar direction, consistent with her travel habits, but subsequent images in the chain of area cameras were not clear enough to determine her location afterward. The field searches, both in the immediate range and extended toward the desert and mountain crevices, also yielded no useful results. There were no signs of the vehicle crashing, no drop-off points, no unusual tire tracks, and no indications that Hannah turned off the main route. The scant physical clues obtained in the early phase, such as plastic fragments or loose metal pieces, were all determined to belong to other vehicles or unrelated to the disappearance. When reviewing the list of abandoned or accident-involved vehicles from the same time period, the investigating agency also found no silver Civic matching the car Hannah was using. All incident reports in the area, though carefully checked, provided no information strong enough to determine the cause or direction of the disappearance. Efforts to interview witnesses, both those identified from initial data and people living near routes Hannah might have taken, yielded no data to pinpoint her journey on the night she vanished. No one remembered seeing a matching vehicle in unusual circumstances or in a notable area. The information obtained, if any, was fragmented and could not be independently verified. Lauren Bright's statement, though not absolutely verifiable, contained no signs contradicting the data and did not form a basis for continued investigation. Evan Pike's statement was consistent and indirectly confirmed through Hannah's schedule. Hypotheses about a solo accident, voluntary departure, or intervention by others were all preliminarily considered, but none had specific supporting data. The greatest focus in the comprehensive evaluation was that over 3 years, police found no trace of Hannah's vehicle. This became the critical factor leading to the case's deadlock, because without locating the car, the investigating agency could not determine the final point of the journey, could not collect collision traces, could not examine evidence inside the vehicle, and could not reconstruct the final events before Hannah's disappearance. All analysis directions depended on finding the car, and when this did not happen, the case could not progress effectively along any investigative branch. After comprehensively reviewing all collected content and evaluating the potential for continued investigation, police concluded that Hannah Mercer's disappearance fell into the category of insufficient data to investigate further. This is the classification applied to files where all reasonable measures in the initial phase have been implemented but yielded no results, and expanding the investigation no longer has a basis. Therefore, in 2005, the case was officially transferred to the cold case list. In the summary note, the investigating agency emphasized the key factor preventing the case from advancing further as vehicle not found. Hannah's car was seen as the sole pivotal point that could unlock additional data, but when it was not located despite extensive search efforts, the entire investigative process was forced to halt. The Hannah Mercer disappearance file was placed into archive status, awaiting new data, with the expectation that in the future, if new elements emerged, the case could be reopened and continued analysis based on the initial data carefully recorded during the 2000-2005 period. In 2017, more than 15 years after Hannah Mercer's disappearance file was transferred to archive status and was almost no longer mentioned in Henderson police professional meetings, a chance incident reopened the entire case in a way no one anticipated. When the Nevada Department of Transportation implemented a maintenance and periodic geological survey project in the area bordering Hoover Dam, engineers and workers responsible for checking slope stability discovered an unusual depression on the rock surface located tens of meters below the road level. This was a rugged terrain area where natural rock walls formed many deep, hard-to-observe crevices from above and rarely accessed by anyone except terrain survey teams. During the status inspection, a worker spotted a dull gray metal patch exposed from the eroded soil and rock layer, initially thinking it was just debris blown down by the wind. However, as they approached closer and cleared away the dust and rock covering the surface, the object's shape gradually revealed that it was not a loose metal fragment, but remnants of a larger structure, very likely belonging to a heavily deformed vehicle. Recognizing the discovery exceeded the survey team's scope of work, the managing unit called the Hoover Dam Area Patrol Force to request an initial assessment. Patrol personnel went to the scene, used close-range observation equipment, and confirmed the object in the deep rock crevice had a shape consistent with a severely damaged car frame. Due to the vehicle's position in a hard-to-access blind spot and highly dangerous if descended using standard support equipment, they sealed off the area and reported to the Technical Rescue Unit, as well as Clark County Police, to take over the incident. After rescue personnel used specialized ropes and rigging to access the location, they confirmed it was indeed a car deformed almost completely. The paint layer was nearly worn away by time and the harsh environment, but some remaining frame parts indicated it was a model from the early 2000s era. The vehicle was partially buried under slid-down soil and rock from the slope, causing it to sink deep and be obscured from view for many years. When the vehicle was secured for hoisting up to the road surface, the technical team discovered the VIN was still readable on a frame section not fully corroded. Extracting the VIN was a critical step to identify the owner and link to records, and when police checked the VIN through the state's vehicle registration system, the result caused the entire team to pause. The VIN matched exactly with the Honda Civic Hannah Mercer was using at the time of her 2002 disappearance. This was the first information in over a decade and a half, indicating where the car that vanished with Hannah might be found. Recognizing the seriousness and direct relevance to a long-standing cold case, Clark County Police immediately notified Henderson Police, the unit handling the original file, to take over the matter. When the car was hoisted up to the road surface, the entire front frame was almost completely deformed, the roof heavily dented, and doors crushed into the frame, indicating the vehicle had sustained major impact before stopping at the position below the crevice. As soon as the car was opened, forensic personnel discovered bone-like objects inside the driver's compartment. Though not identifiable by sight due to prolonged decomposition in the desert's dry heat, the overall shape indicated a high likelihood of human remains. The forensic team collected all remaining skeletal parts, fabric fragments, surviving personal items, and transported them to the examination lab for analysis. Although results were not immediate, the presence of remains inside the VIN-matching car was sufficient for police to determine they had found what was likely the final point of Hannah's journey. When the vehicle and remains were brought to the examination lab, Henderson Police officially recorded this event as a breakthrough and filed to reopen the case as a reactivated cold case. According to state regulations, when new physical evidence appears in long-standing missing persons files, the case must be returned to active investigation status. This marked the first time since 2005 that Hannah Mercer's disappearance was brought back to the center of the analysis process. All information related to the car, scene conditions, discovery location, and remains condition were compiled into detailed reports to serve the next investigative phase. Finding the car opened the possibility of tracing back what happened at this location, while resolving the biggest bottleneck that had stalled the case, determining where the vehicle ended its journey. From the moment the car was found, the investigating agency officially announced that Hannah Mercer's disappearance was no longer a closed file, but had shifted to a case with new evidence requiring in-depth analysis to determine related events in the final moments before the car plunged into the crevice beside Hoover Dam. When the Honda Civic was hoisted up from the rock crevice near Hoover Dam and brought to the examination lab, the first step in the forensic process was to identify the skeletal remains found inside the car. Due to over 15 years having passed, all soft tissue had decomposed, leaving only bones, but Clark County forensic experts still proceeded to collect DNA samples from long bones and teeth, positions most likely to preserve genetic material longest in Nevada desert dry heat conditions. The DNA samples were compared to reference samples from Hannah Mercer's family, which had been stored in the missing persons file when the case was reported in 2002. Genetic analysis yielded a complete match, confirming the remains were Hannah's. Officially confirming the victim's identity was the critical first step in restarting the investigation, as it established that the discovery site of the car was the endpoint of her journey, thereby allowing authorities to shift focus to scene analysis and determining the cause of the vehicle falling into the crevice. After identification, the forensic team focused on assessing the Civic's damage condition to see if the deformations could provide information about collisions before the car fell. The car was heavily dented in the front and roof due to impact force when falling from height to the crevice bottom, but the rear section, which typically sustains less force in free fall, had deformations not entirely consistent with a straight vertical fall mechanism. Technical analysis showed the rear was indented in a curved shape, suggesting that before plunging into the crevice, the vehicle had sustained force from behind, deforming the metal surface in a forward-pushing direction. Forensic mechanical experts used model comparison methods to determine if this deformation was from collision in open space or from compression when buried under soil and rock over many years. Initial conclusions indicated the rear deformation did not resemble passive compression signs from the natural environment. Instead, the impact force showed signs of concentration at points, suggesting collision with an object having a hard surface and smaller area than the car's rear. The indentation position being offset to one side rather than centered further reinforced the hypothesis that the vehicle was impacted from behind while in motion. To strengthen conclusions about the collision mechanism, the forensic department continued analyzing surface traces on the metal, including scratches, scrapes, and metal sections deformed by friction. Some scratches on the rear had horizontal directions, quite sharp compared to the heavily oxidized surface over time, indicating these scratches likely formed before the car fell into the crevice. These did not align with damage from the fall process or from being buried in soil and rock for many years afterward. Notably, among the scratches, the forensic team discovered a small but clear groove containing traces of foreign paint adhered to the scratched metal of the rear. This paint sample was dark red, with the powder structure still sufficient for analysis despite most fading over time. Material analysts extracted the sample and observed it under optical microscope to determine coating characteristics. When cross-referenced with commercial auto paint databases from the early 2000s, they noted that this paint sample did not match any components of the originally silver Honda Civic, nor did it fit auxiliary paints possibly used in repairs or maintenance. This clearly indicated the paint trace did not belong to Hannah's car, but came from another vehicle or object that directly contacted the rear before the Civic plunged into the crevice. To determine the relative timing of the paint trace formation, the forensic team analyzed the oxidation layers surrounding the scratched area. Noting that oxidation covered part of the surface but did not completely fill the foreign paint groove, they concluded the paint trace was created before the car fell, but not too long before that moment. This reinforced the assumption that the collision occurred while the car was moving on the road on the night Hannah disappeared. In addition to scratches bearing foreign paint, The forensic team identified further metal flaking and coating peeling at the lower rear, indicating low-angle impact, consistent with a rear collision by a vehicle of different height from the Civic. Experts also reconstructed the correlation between the dent on the car and the overall rear shape to determine contact angle. Through analysis, they determined the impact force came from a lower position, pushing the rear upward and forward. This aligned with impact from a vehicle with a higher chassis, such as a Jeep or SUV, while Hannah's Civic had a low structure and center of gravity close to the ground. Combining all factors, surface deformation, impact force direction, scratches, foreign paint, and damaged structure, the forensic report concluded that the Civic had sustained significant rear impact before falling into the crevice where it was found. After the 2017 forensic report confirmed the presence of strange paint marks on the rear of the Honda Civic and indicated a very high likelihood that Hannah Mercer's vehicle had sustained a rear-end collision before plunging into the ravine, the investigative agency proceeded to the next step, cross-referencing all existing physical evidence with the records collected from the 2002 phase. This was a critical phase because it allowed the use of modern forensic technologies and databases, tools that either did not exist or were not sufficiently developed at the time the case was initially opened, to reanalyze old evidence that previously could not be exploited in detail. The evidence collected in 2002, including various material fragments scattered in the area near the route Hannah may have taken, was retrieved from the cold case storage and sent to the lab for reanalysis. These samples included plastic shards, small metal pieces, and a few paint chips that had been deemed worthless because their origin could not be determined in the initial phase. However, with advanced material analysis technology and an annually expanding automotive paint database, the 2017 forensic team was able to dissect the chemical structure and layers of paint in each sample, cross-referencing them against tens of thousands of stored commercial paint samples. Among the old evidence, there was a small dark red paint sample that had previously been overlooked because it did not match Hannah's vehicle, and there was insufficient data to link it to any other vehicle. But when reanalyzed, using modern infrared spectroscopy and fluorescent spectroscopy, the technical team discovered that this sample had chemical characteristics identical to the strange paint adhering to the rear of the Civic recovered from the ravine. Both samples were two-layer paints with pigment powder and binder compositions characteristic of certain SUV and Jeep models from the early 2000s. When entered into the commercial paint database, the results showed a high match with the paint code used on numerous Jeep Wrangler and Jeep Cherokee models from that era. This was a significant discovery because in the 2002 records, Lauren Bright owned a Jeep from the same period that used the same dark red paint code. This did not immediately establish a direct connection, but given that the case had lacked clear pieces for many years, the fact that two paint samples, one on Hannah's car and one collected near the route she may have taken, had matching characteristics, was an event of great evidentiary significance. The investigative team re-examined the 2002 data on Lauren's vehicle, including the car's color, ownership history, repair possibilities, and any maintenance records from the relevant time frame. In her old statement, Lauren said there was no collision on the night Hannah disappeared, and her Jeep had no issues requiring repair during that period. Previously, police had inspected Lauren's car, but noted no significant signs of collision. However, that inspection occurred several months after the disappearance, a time frame potentially long enough to perform repairs without leaving easily detectable traces. The matching paint samples between the 2017 scene and the 2002 evidence prompted the investigative team to reconstruct the route Hannah may have taken on the night she vanished, this time not only based on habits and camera data, but also incorporating terrain features, the location of the old evidence, and the site where the car was found after more than a decade. Using detailed topographic maps and travel simulation data, the team determined that several segments of Hannah's route that night had conditions suitable for a rear-end collision. These segments were in the transition area between downtown Las Vegas and Henderson, where the road narrows, street lighting diminishes, and traffic density is not too high to produce witnesses, yet not so deserted as to rule out other personal vehicles traveling nearby. Among the 3 routes analyzed in 2002, the southeast-bound route was deemed the most compatible with the 2017 analysis results. The red paint chips were found near a gentle curve, a location where a vehicle impacted from behind could easily lose control. By further cross-referencing data through reconstructing the route from the Bellagio to the Civic's discovery site, the team found that the car likely veered off the lane and plunged into the gradually sloping terrain toward Hoover Dam. Simulation analysis based on elevation, ground incline, and the vehicle's fall angle showed a significant match with the Civic's discovery position, reinforcing the hypothesis that the collision not only occurred but was the direct factor causing Hannah's car to fall into the ravine and remain hidden for 15 years. After the 2017 investigative team connected the matching paint samples and reconstructed the route where the collision likely occurred, the Hannah Mercer case began attracting attention again, not only within the Henderson police, but also among those who had lived or worked near the routes analyzed in 2002. When local media reported the discovery of the Civic in the ravine near Hoover Dam, a witness who had been interviewed in the year Hannah disappeared proactively reached out again, stating he had additional data to provide, data that in 2002 he did not consider important enough. But now, in light of the newly released information, he realized needed to be shared for the investigation. This witness, a delivery driver who frequently operated on the route connecting Las Vegas and Henderson, said that on the night Hannah vanished, he saw 2 vehicles traveling close to each other on a dimly lit suburban road segment, one of which was a small light-colored car, matching the description of a Honda Civic, and the other a dark-colored SUV, or Jeep, with unusually bright headlights. The time the witness observed the 2 vehicles was on a gentle curve, near the location the investigative team later identified as the likely collision site. When interviewed in 2002, the witness mentioned the 2 cars but could not specify details, like paint color, distance, or exact events, as he only caught a glimpse while focusing on driving his own vehicle. However, in his 2017 reconnection, he said he remembered more clearly after reading about the case reopening and seeing photos of the Civic being salvaged from the ravine. He stated that what caught his attention in that moment was that the 2 vehicles seemed to be traveling closer than normal, as if the rear vehicle was trying to tail or close the gap with the one in front. He did not hear a collision sound, as his windows were closed and the radio was on, but the SUV or Jeep's headlights behind illuminated the rear of the small car ahead in a way that made him sense the 2 vehicles were in an interaction that was not entirely normal. This information, though retrospective, aligned with the forensic conclusion about the direction of force on the rear of Hannah's car, a force determined to come from behind, concentrated on a low point at the rear. When cross-referencing the witness's account with the collision reconstruction model the technical team had performed, the agency found similarity between the description and the analysis results. A vehicle with a higher chassis, traveling behind, could have generated a pushing force, causing the Civic to lose control and veer toward the sloping terrain leading to the ravine. The witness also described that the small car ahead navigated the curve at a steady speed, while the SUV Jeep behind appeared to enter the turn faster. This was a key detail because it matched the characteristics of collisions where the rear vehicle fails to slow down at the right moment, causing its front to strike the rear of the front vehicle, especially on curves where the distance between vehicles changes rapidly. When asked why he did not provide these details in 2002, the witness explained that at the time he did not think it was important information, as he did not witness an accident directly and saw no signs of skidding or unusual brake lights. He thought the 2 cars might just be coincidentally close or one overtaking, which often happens on sparsely trafficked roads at night. However, upon reading that the Civic was found in the ravine with strong signs of rear impact, he began to recognize the coincidence between what he saw and what the investigators released. The detail he remembered most clearly was the color of the SUV's Jeep behind. According to him, The scant streetlight reflection and the vehicle's own headlights made him perceive the rear vehicle's color as leaning toward dark red or deep red. When cross-referenced with the paint code analyzed in the forensic report, the investigative agency found significant alignment between the witness's color description and the paint code matching the Jeep model Lauren Bright owned in 2002. After the 2002 witness reconnected and provided information that significantly aligned with the 2017 forensic results, the investigative agency moved to re-cross-reference the original statements of Evan Pike and Lauren Bright in the new context, with the goal of determining the true level of involvement of each person when placed within the reconstructed event model based on physical evidence, route, and collision traces. The review of statements was not aimed at finding administrative errors in the 2002 interview process, but at assessing whether either person had provided information inconsistent with data now verified through science and witness testimony, thereby identifying the investigative focus. First, Evan Pike's statement was re-examined alongside all new data. Evan stated that he met Hannah completely by chance before his evening shift on the day of the disappearance, spoke briefly, then each went their separate ways, and he did not see Hannah again after that point. When cross-referencing this statement with the new data, the agency found no contradictions. Evan never owned a vehicle with color or structure matching the paint sample or collision marks found. He also had no travel route that would place him in the potential collision area. Work location records, hours, travel duration, and personal factors were all re-verified and aligned with his original statement. Another key point was that Evan did not appear in any witness statements, camera data, or incident reports related to the suburban road area where the collision was believed to have occurred. This consistency, when placed in the context of new physical evidence, indicated that Evan's 2002 statement retained its value, and there was no reason to place him under suspicion. Therefore, the investigative team officially eliminated Evan from all analyses related to impacting Hannah's Civic at the time of her disappearance. In contrast, Lauren Bright's statement, when placed in the new context, revealed numerous anomalies that were previously hard to detect due to lack of cross-referencing data. In her 2002 statement, Lauren affirmed that on the evening Hannah disappeared, she was at home and did not leave her residence. She also affirmed that no aspects of her vehicle required inspection or repair during that time. With the new 2017 data, especially the paint sample matching the code of the Jeep Lauren owned, the location of old evidence on the reconstructed route, and the updated witness statement, seeing a small car ahead and a red Jeep behind, the points in Lauren's statement revealed hard-to-explain contradictions. First, the at-home all-evening claim could not be verified in 2002, but now became more suspicious when juxtaposed with forensic results. There was no evidence showing Lauren left home, but also no evidence confirming she was actually there. This ambiguity only became notable as new data emerged, showing alignment between the vehicle type Lauren owned and the rear impact characteristics on Hannah's car. Second, the statement about her vehicle's condition, that there was no collision, no need for repair or maintenance during that time, became suspicious when the team cross-referenced data from maintenance centers around Henderson. Although no exact repair record for Lauren's car could be pinpointed due to many old records no longer being retained, her assertion of no collision during the period when forensics showed Hannah's car sustained impact from a vehicle of Jeep-equivalent height raised major questions. Third, when reanalyzing the route the technical team deemed likely for the collision, this route overlapped with one of the paths Lauren regularly used to travel from home to various places she frequented. This was not incriminating evidence, but it created a positional proximity possibility between Lauren's vehicle and Hannah's on the night of the disappearance, a possibility her statement completely denied. Fourth, Lauren's original statement about the extent of her acquaintance with Hannah showed signs of downplaying the relationship. While some mutual acquaintances described them meeting at several shared social activities, Lauren claimed very limited acquaintance. This difference, in the context of old records lacking evidence, was insufficient for suspicion. But when the matching paint sample indicated collision possibility, Lauren's slight concealment of acquaintance level became a detail open to multiple interpretations, including ones unfavorable to her. Fifth, no data in the 2002-2005 records showed Lauren ever being checked for her actual schedule after leaving work on the day Hannah disappeared. When the case was reanalyzed in 2017, this became a gap in the initial investigative process, making the at-home all-evening claim even harder to accept without corroborating evidence. Overall, cross-referencing Evan and Lauren's statements in the light of new data painted a clear picture. Evan's statement stood firm with no contradictions when compared to technical evidence, while Lauren's revealed multiple mismatches with forensic results, witness identification, and root analysis. This difference elevated Lauren from a witness once considered unrelated directly to the only person in the original records whose statement could not be reasonably explained when cross-referenced with the scientific data collected in 2017. After Lauren Bright's statement revealed numerous inexplicable contradictions when cross-referenced with the new physical evidence, the investigative agency moved to the next step to verify whether the Jeep that Lauren owned in 2002 had ever been repaired in the period immediately following Hannah's disappearance. This was an investigative direction that could not previously be fully pursued because records from small garages are often not maintained long-term, and by the time the case was closed in 2005, police found no relevant repair records. However, when the case was reopened in 2017, the investigative team applied a reverse tracking method using addresses of garages still operating in the Henderson, Boulder City, Las Vegas area, focusing on independent garages specializing in SUV and Jeep repairs during the early 2000s. The process took many months because not every garage still retained paper records from 15 years earlier, but by combining old tax data, business licenses, and information from the Nevada Garage Association, the team ultimately identified a small garage on the outskirts of Henderson, where the former owner still possessed a portion of the manual archived records from 2000-2004. When the investigators met with the garage owner, a man who had retired years ago but maintained the habit of never discarding ledgers, they explained the purpose of the investigation and asked him to assist in searching the old records based on the description: a deep red Jeep, early 2000s model year, brought in for repair within a few days after the week Hannah went missing. The garage owner, despite his advanced age, still remembered that in that year, a young customer had brought the vehicle in late afternoon, stating that the car had hit something on a dark road, unclear what it was. When the investigator provided a description of Lauren Bright, he confirmed that the general appearance matched the person who had brought the vehicle in for repair that year. After reviewing a stack of old paper invoices stored in a document box, he unexpectedly found an invoice dated exactly 3 days after Hannah was reported missing. The invoice described a deep red Jeep Wrangler with damage to the front bumper and an off-center dent on the left side of the front end, along with details of replacing a paint section, dent repair, and surface restoration. Notably, the invoice description also noted bright-colored paint adhering to the corner of the impact, and the garage owner noted that he had to sand off this foreign paint layer before repainting the dented area. When the investigator asked about the color of the foreign paint, the garage owner could not recall exactly but confirmed that it was not the Jeep's color and looked like silver or bright, perfectly matching the color of Hannah's Honda Civic. This was the first time the investigation obtained a direct link, proving that Lauren's Jeep had sustained an impact during a time frame extremely close to the disappearance, completely contradicting her no-collision statement in the 2002 records. Not only did the invoice provide critical information, but the garage owner's description also reinforced the forensic analysis direction. When asked for more details about the extent of the damage, he stated that the impact did not cause deep deformation severe enough to completely damage the frame, but it was strong enough to distort the Jeep's front end and create a dent equivalent to the force necessary to cause the dent-type damage on the rear of the Civic found under the rock crevice. Moreover, he emphasized that the dent on the Jeep had a lower contact height than the typical height for vehicles of the same type, completely aligning with the forensic analysis that the force impacting the Civic came from a taller vehicle. but the collision point occurred at the lower part of the front end, consistent with the mechanism when a larger vehicle accelerates into a curve and strikes the rear of a smaller vehicle ahead. The garage owner also remembered that the customer, whom he affirmed had an appearance similar to Lauren, wanted the vehicle repaired quickly and without leaving any signs of the collision. She paid in cash, provided no detailed contact information, and seemed unwilling for the garage to keep full records beyond the mandatory invoice. This behavior, in 2002, was not considered unusual because many customers chose cash payments for minor repairs to avoid insurance notifications. But in the 2017 context, it became a significant detail, indicating the possibility of intentional concealment at the time of Hannah's disappearance. The investigators continued to ask whether the garage owner remembered anything else about the customer's statements on the repair day. After some effort to recall, he remembered that she had said an animal ran across the road, causing her to swerve and hit another object. But the prior damage description, clear dent, bright paint adhering to the vehicle, and no signs of damage to the undercarriage or sides, showed that this story was technically inconsistent. A collision with a large animal typically creates damage in higher areas or causes more widespread harm. In contrast, the Jeep's damage was concentrated on the lower front, consistent with striking the rear of a small sedan like the Civic. When the investigative agency collected all the repair records, scanned the invoice, and recorded the garage owner's statement, they cross-referenced this discovery with the collision model reconstructed from forensic data. The results matched significantly. Dent height, adhering paint color, impact force location, and repair timing all aligned with the collision, causing the damage found on Hannah's vehicle. In particular, the repair occurring just a few days after Hannah's disappearance made the possibility of random coincidence nearly zero. From all the verified factors, the garage invoice, the direct description from the repair technician, matching paint samples, and repair timing, the investigative agency had in hand the most important piece of the puzzle since the case was reopened. For the first time in 15 years, they had clear physical evidence showing that a specific vehicle, Lauren Bright's Jeep, had sustained damage entirely consistent with causing the damage to Hannah's Civic right before the car fell into the rock crevice. After verifying the 2002 repair records for Lauren Bright's Jeep and cross-referencing all technical evidence showing near absolute alignment with the collision causing damage to Hannah's Civic, the investigative team shifted to a critical direction, tracing Lauren over the more than 15-year period since the case was closed. They needed to know where she had been, what she had done, how many residences she had changed, whether she had altered her identity, vehicles, or jobs, and especially whether there was intent to evade law enforcement. This context required a deep, prolonged, and multi-state investigative process, utilizing tools that did not exist in 2002 but by 2017 had become indispensable in reopened cold cases. The first step was for the team to retrieve information from Nevada's residency and driver's license databases to determine when Lauren left the state. According to official records, Lauren moved out of Henderson in late 2003, just over a year after Hannah's disappearance and before the case was officially closed. After that point, there was no further activity from her in Nevada, no new vehicle registrations, no address changes, no in-state banking activity. This led the agency to suspect that she had actively severed all easily traceable ties in Nevada. Continuing the search using interstate databases, the team discovered a residency record matching in age and physical description that appeared in Oregon a few years later, but under a different name, Laura Brennan. Although the name change was not illegal, the timing of the new identity's appearance aligned almost perfectly with Lauren's disappearance from Nevada. Cross-referencing photos on the Oregon driver's license showed that Laura Brennan's face had many features matching old images of Lauren, naturally with changes over time, but facial bone structure, build, and some subtle identifying characteristics remained very clear. The next step was for the team to examine Lauren's financial transaction history throughout her time in Oregon. They retrieved information from legal bank account reports, credit card transactions, and tax history. Though not highly active financially, Lauren appeared to live stably with average income, working at a local sports gear store, then moving to an office clerk position for a small company in Eugene. There were no signs she left Oregon for extended periods or traveled outside the Pacific Northwest for many years. Transaction data also showed she did not purchase a new vehicle, but had 2 payments for older SUV maintenance services in 2008 and 2012 at service centers in Oregon, aligning with her continued use of the old Jeep. This was a key factor. If she knew the Jeep had been involved in a serious incident, continuing to use it for an extended period could indicate confidence that the case had faded into oblivion. When the team examined Lauren's residences in each phase in Oregon more closely, they noted she often changed addresses after 3-4 years, not overly unusual, but always coinciding with new financial events like opening accounts, changing jobs, or registering medical information. This showed she was not living in hiding, but maintained a certain level of privacy. Another point that caught the agency's attention was that Lauren had no long-term relationships or easily traceable community activities. Local data logs recorded her as living quite reclusively, with few social connections and no participation in public organizations. When piecing this data into the overall picture, the team saw that Lauren did not disappear completely from society, but shifted to a detached life, using a new name and maintaining low financial and social profiles, a pattern often seen in individuals wanting to avoid attention over a long period. When the agency confirmed Lauren was indeed Laura Brennan and still living in Oregon, they began gathering additional data to assess the feasibility of obtaining an arrest warrant. First, they compiled a comparison table of 3 evidence groups: physical evidence, circumstantial evidence, and supporting evidence. When aggregated, these 3 groups met the threshold, allowing the case to advance to prosecution consideration. The team also contacted the Nevada Prosecutor's Office to re-evaluate the sufficiency of evidence under 2017 standards, which permitted stronger use of forensic technology and composite evidence compared to 2002. When the prosecution reviewed the file, they determined that the chain of evidence had reached probable cause, reasonable grounds to believe Lauren was directly involved in Hannah Mercer's death, sufficient to request an arrest warrant. After completing the legal evaluation, the team submitted the request to the Clark County judge, proposing an arrest warrant for Lauren Bright, currently using the name Laura Brennan. The warrant was approved after the judge reviewed the entire file, including the collision report, garage evidence, witness statements, and residency data. This was the first time in over 15 years that the agency had official legal grounds to approach Lauren and move the Hannah Mercer case into an entirely new phase. When the arrest warrant was signed and transferred from Nevada to Oregon, the investigative team coordinated with the Eugene Police Department to deploy a plan to approach Lauren, who was now living under the name Laura Brennan. The local task force was instructed to carry out the arrest discreetly, to avoid drawing attention in the residential area, and to ensure Lauren had no opportunity to flee. On an early morning in November 2017, officers approached her residence, a small apartment near downtown Eugene, where Lauren worked at an administrative office. When she opened the door, Lauren appeared calm but confused upon being informed of the arrest warrant from Nevada. She did not resist, but remained completely silent throughout the process of being handcuffed and transported to the Lane County Detention Facility. Fingerprint identification immediately matched the Nevada database, officially confirming that Laura Brennan was indeed Lauren Bright. News of the arrest was quickly relayed back to Nevada, where the investigative team prepared extradition procedures to have Lauren returned to Henderson to face charges. The primary indictment filed by the Clark County prosecutor with the court consisted of 3 groups of charges: 1 causing an accident resulting in death, 2 fleeing the scene of the accident, 3 concealing evidence, and obstructing the investigation. Although the incident occurred in 2002, Nevada law still allowed prosecution because this was a fatality case involving flight, with no statute of limitations applying. The prosecutors emphasized that new forensic evidence, along with supplemental data from witnesses and vehicle repair records, had created a seamless chain of events, showing that Lauren had caused the collision that sent Hannah's car plummeting into the ravine without stopping or reporting it. After several weeks of procedures, Lauren was extradited to Nevada, and a preliminary hearing was held to determine if the evidence was sufficient for trial. Lauren's attorney argued that it was all speculation based on physical traces and witness recollections after 15 years, but the court determined the evidence was strong enough to advance the case to formal trial. At the 2017 trial, the Clark County courtroom was packed, not due to sensationalism but because of the unexpected revival of a missing person case that seemed permanently forgotten. The prosecutor opened by presenting the overall sequence of events: Hannah leaving the Bellagio, disappearing en route, the file being closed in 2005 due to lack of evidence, and the case being reopened only after the Civic was found in the ravine beside Hoover Dam. The prosecutor stressed that the key breakthrough in shattering the 15-year wall of silence was the rear impact trace. The foreign paint matching the color of Lauren's Jeep, and the repair invoice found at an old garage. The prosecution's presentation included a chain of forensic evidence admitted by the court: a 3D simulation of the collision based on the Civic's deformation data, structural metal analysis showing impact from a vehicle with height corresponding to a Jeep, and especially the comparison of two paint samples, one found on the Civic and one collected from old evidence in 2002. The forensic expert explained to the court that the match in chemical composition between the 2002 paint sample and the remaining paint on the Civic's rear was a random coincidence probability of nearly zero, because that paint code was only used for certain Jeep models in a specific period. When asked to describe the sequence leading to the conclusion, the expert recreated the collision force using deformation analysis techniques, showing the Civic's rear being pushed forward at an offset angle, consistent with the mechanism of a natural fall, but perfectly matching a front-end ram from a Jeep striking during a curve. Next, the prosecutor presented testimony from the garage owner who repaired Lauren's Jeep 3 days after the disappearance. The owner confirmed receiving a dark red Jeep for repair, brought in by a young woman who paid in cash, claiming she hit an animal. He clearly described the dent, the silver paint adhered to the vehicle, and the urgent repair request. When the defense attorney questioned his memory, the owner stated he had kept the invoice because you never know when it might be needed. And in fact, the invoice detailed the damage location, matching exactly the forensic description of the impact shape on the Civic. Another piece of evidence presented was the updated testimony of the delivery witness who had seen the two vehicles on the night Hannah disappeared. His account of a red Jeep closely tailing a light-colored Civic in a dark curve, with the Jeep's headlights illuminating the Civic's rear, was linked by the prosecutor to the collision model as well as the analysis of the old evidence location. The witness said he did not think it was important information in 2002, but upon learning the vehicle was found after 15 years, he realized that moment could have been the collision phase. When cross-referenced with forensic results, his recollection of the Jeep's dark red color became one of the critical puzzle pieces. In the defense portion, Lauren's attorney argued that the evidence was merely speculative, that the paint sample could have transferred in a parking lot or during later repairs. However, the prosecution countered that the coincidence of the collision location, paint sample, repair timing, and Lauren's contradictory statements could not be mere chance. They reiterated that Lauren claimed there was no collision, but the repair invoice said otherwise. At the same time, data about her changing her name and leaving Nevada just 1 year after the disappearance, while not direct evidence of guilt, reinforced the assessment of evasion. During cross-examination, Lauren remained silent on her attorney's advice, and this silence left the jury with no opportunity to hear any explanation from her about the garage invoice or the paint on the vehicle. After nearly 3 weeks of trial, the jury concluded that the chain of evidence, though lacking a direct witness to the collision, met the legal standard to establish Lauren's responsibility for Hannah's death. Based on scientific analysis, route reconstruction modeling, garage evidence, and independent witness testimony, the court declared that Lauren Bright, under her current identity of Laura Brennan, was responsible for the actions of causing an accident resulting in death, fleeing the scene, and intentionally concealing evidence for over 15 years. This was the first conclusion to transform the case from an unsolved missing person file into one with full legal accountability after more than a decade and a half of silence. After the jury concluded that Lauren Bright was responsible for the death of Hannah Mercer, the sentencing hearing took place in a particularly somber but resolute atmosphere. The Clark County judge, after reviewing the entire record, legal analysis, and the severity of the flight behavior lasting over 15 years, sentenced Lauren to 30 years in prison. The penalty for causing an accident resulting in death and intentionally concealing evidence, clearly reflecting the assessment that abandoning the victim, unfound for such a long period, had caused immense harm not only to life, but also to the prolonged impasse for the family and community. The sentence officially closed the Hannah Mercer file as a successfully resolved cold case, ending the insufficient data status that had existed since 2005. In the summary document, the Nevada Investigative Agency clearly stated that the case's prolonged impasse was not due to lack of effort, but due to lack of a breakthrough. The point that only emerged in 2017 when Hannah's Civic was found in the ravine beside Hoover Dam. Locating the vehicle after more than a decade and a half became the decisive factor, proving the long-held view of investigative experts in many missing person cases involving personal vehicles. The car itself is the vital evidence, and without finding the car, nearly all investigative models are left hanging in a state, unable to progress further. The impact of the case on missing person handling procedures in Nevada was profound and lasting. After the case was resolved, the Henderson Police Department and Clark County coordinated to update standard investigative protocols, including strengthening requirements for fully documenting and long-term storing small evidence, including paint chips, metal fragments, and low-quality camera data. Some evidence in the Hannah case had been deemed valueless in 2002, but with 2017 technology, it became the key to the breakthrough. Therefore, the new protocols require all micro-evidence to be stored in a form, allowing reanalysis over long periods, preventing recurrence of missing clues that could become evidence in the future. Additionally, the case became a prime example of the importance of periodic cold case re-evaluation mechanisms. Previously, cold cases were only reopened with external information or new suspicions. But after witnessing the value of applying modern forensic technology to old evidence, Nevada implemented periodic review processes for unresolved files, especially missing person cases involving vehicles. This process includes reanalyzing evidence with new technology, rechecking vehicle records, screening repair garages from the relevant time, and requiring forensic labs to cross-reference evidence with expanded paint and material databases that did not exist before. The success of the Hannah Mercer case also prompted police in counties across the state to prioritize interstate cooperation, as Lauren leaving Nevada and changing her name in Oregon demonstrated the necessity of sharing residency, financial, and vehicle data to prevent similar cases of concealing traces for years. On a broader level, the case had a significant impact on the Nevada community. Hannah's family, though unable to regain their loved one, finally received answers after more than 15 years, ending the prolonged wait amid doubt and despair. The Henderson and Las Vegas communities viewed the case resolution as proof of the value of persistence in investigation and the importance of not overlooking any evidence, no matter how seemingly unrelated. Overall, the Hannah Mercer case became a representative illustration of how a seemingly hopeless cold case could be solved through the combination of advancing forensic science, well-maintained evidence management systems, accurate collision reconstruction modeling, and the investigative agency's steadfastness in reconnecting scattered pieces. Finding the Civic after 15 years not only provided answers for one family, but also laid the foundation for a new approach to missing person cases in Nevada. No case is truly closed if the vehicle remains unfound. and no evidence is too small to ignore in the journey to uncover the truth. The story of the disappearance and death of Hannah Mercer, resolved after more than 15 years thanks to the discovery of the Civic in the ravine beside Hoover Dam, offers many important lessons for American society today, especially in the context where adult missing person cases still account for a significant proportion and rely heavily on federal interstate investigative capabilities. A key detail of the case was Lauren's Jeep being repaired just a few days after the 2002 disappearance. But the lack of forensic technology at the time meant the silver paint and dent were not recognized at their true importance. This reminds us that in real life, the truth does not always emerge immediately. It requires persistence, time, and a justice system flexible enough to revisit files that seem long cold. The fact that Hannah's Civic was found after 15 years due to a chance geological survey also highlights the importance of infrastructure, data management, and long-term evidence storage. In the United States, thousands of families are still searching for missing loved ones. This story proves that a small detail, like the red paint sample on the Civic's rear, can completely become the key to solving the case in the future. It emphasizes the need to invest in modern forensic technology and maintain expanded evidence databases to not miss opportunities to restore justice. The biggest lesson is personal responsibility and honesty. Lauren did not intend to cause the death, but her fleeing, changing her name, denying the collision, and prolonging the truth for over 15 years shows that evading consequences always makes tragedy heavier, not only for the victim's family, but also for the community itself. In American society, where the law is based on transparency and self-reporting, Hannah's story is a powerful reminder that even when mistakes happen in a moment, honesty and the courage to face the truth are always the only path to avoid irreparable consequences later. If you want to continue following cases solved after many years of silence, like Hannah's story, remember to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes. Thank you for joining until the end of this journey, and see you in the next video with more real and meaningful stories.